Hi guys, welcome to Amateur Chemistry. So in today's video, I am going to be making some silane gas from silicon and silicon dioxide and doing some nice experiments with it. This is actually the last video of the series about making silane from dirt that I have been making for a while now, and in two previous videos I have extracted silicon dioxide from dirt and transformed it into pure silicon, and in this video I am going to make some silane out of it. Silane is just a silicon analog of methane, meaning that instead of a carbon atom in the center, it has a silicon one. But unlike methane, which we all know and love for making our food warm, silane is much less stable, and this makes it pyrophoric, meaning that its auto-ignition temperature is below that of room temperature, meaning that if it goes into contact with air, it instantly combusts and sometimes explodes. That makes it a rather silly gas, and it is just pretty difficult to work with. It is used mainly in making ultra-pure silicon for the semiconductor industry, but in the amateur lab, it is only made because humans just happened to like to light stuff on fire. And it is exactly the purpose of why I will be making it today, and not to make silicon wafers. I really don't know why so many people want me to do this. It is just insanely hard, and until I have the resources of someone like Niall Red, I unfortunately won't be making them. Anyway, to make the silane, I firstly need to make something called magnesium silicide, and to make that, there are two main ways, one involving the use of pure silicon, and the other of silicon dioxide. I firstly wanted to show you the silicon one, but after making the silicon dioxide one, I decided that it would be better to show it first, for a nicer comparison between the two. Anyway, to make the magnesium silicide from silicon dioxide, I have to use a thermite reaction, and I won't go into much detail on it here, but if you want to know more about it, I explained it in the video about making silicon. I have to react the silicon dioxide with magnesium, which will result in the formation of elemental silicon, which will then react with the excess magnesium, producing my desired magnesium silicide and a lot of magnesium oxide, which will be an unwanted byproduct. I firstly weighted out 3 grams of my homemade silicon dioxide, and before mixing it with the magnesium, I had to grind it down, because thermite reactions only work when the ingredients are really finely powdered. To do that, I got my beautiful and shiny mortar that you guys helped me clean, and ground down the silicon dioxide into a very fine powder. I then weighted out 4.8 grams of magnesium powder and added it into the powdered silicon dioxide. After mixing the ingredients, I was left with a nice amount of a grey powder, and now it was time to make the magnesium silicide. To do that, I got the powder into a test tube, and now I have to ignite it. I didn't want to do this in my fume hood, since this reaction has the potential to become really messy, so I placed the test tube on a random desk and started heating it with my trusty blowtorch. At first, the powder started to puff up and bubble, because some residual moisture was escaping, and after heating it for a while, I decided to get it outside to make it easier to see for you guys. Anyway, I also added some sand on top of the powder to limit its exposure to oxygen, but after heating it again, the powders mixed, ruining my stoichiometry, which was just sad. When the test tube got hot enough, the powders reacted very vigorously, creating a cloud of hot products escaping from the test tube, which I unfortunately didn't get on camera, but that meant that most of my precious magnesium silicide is now in my lawn. I recovered what I could by smashing the test tube on a piece of metal, but the yield was very low, which was bad, and also the product looked more grey than black, meaning that the amount of magnesium silicide present was really small. I then got all of the reaction product onto a piece of paper, and now it was time to make the silane. To do that, I had to react the magnesium silicide with some dilute hydrochloric acid to form magnesium chloride and silane. The silane will instantly mix with the air and ignite, making a characteristic crackling sound which would confirm the presence of magnesium silicide. When I added the powder to the acid, some bubbles started to appear, but I didn't hear anything, which meant that the thermite reaction is literally trash. It not only is incredibly dangerous, but the yield is almost non-existent. I wanted to give it a second try, but this time I used a smaller amount of the starting powder to try and contain the reaction a little and recover more of the product. I also used a smaller test tube and some paper to hold it down, and when I heated the tube, the paper decided to ignite, but it also decided to stop burning after a while, so everything was okay. Some moisture also escaped from the powder this time, but it wasn't nearly as bad as before. I also didn't use the sand to cover the top to prevent it from mixing with the powder again. This time, the reaction was much more tame and looked pretty promising. After the test tube cooled down, I wanted to gently scrap the product out of it because somehow I am running low on test tubes, and I asked my brother to hold it for a second, and then this happened. Anyway, after mourning the loss of a great test tube, I got the product onto a piece of paper, and this time it looked much better. It was more black than the previous one, and that gave me hope that it will work. I once again prepared a dilute solution of hydrochloric acid and dropped the powder into it. This time it worked much better, and upon contact with the acid, the powder fizzled and made loud crackling sounds that indicated the presence of silane. I could also see the formation of some small fireballs, which were pretty nice to look at, but there were only a few, and I think that they can do better. So to sum up, the silicon dioxide method of producing silane is not the best, but if done correctly, it can have pretty nice results. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Anyway, now for the overpowered GigaChat Super Duper Mega method, I will use my pure silicon to make the magnesium silicide. To do that, I got my silicon bits and just look how nice they are. They are the fruit of 2 videos worth of work, and I had some beautiful moments with them right from their creation, and now I need to grind them into a very fine powder. To do that, I weighted them, and it turns out that I will be working with only 1.32 grams of silicon, which is not that much. Anyway, I transferred all of the bits into a mortar and started grinding them. Surprisingly, the beads are very tough, requiring several hits with the pestle to break, and after a few minutes of smashing them, I was left with a nice black-grey powder. To the powder, I added 2.31 grams of powdered magnesium and mixed it thoroughly. After that, I was left with a grey powder that I now needed to heat, much like the mixture from earlier. This time, however, this reaction is not a thermite, meaning that it should be less unpredictable and easier to handle. I loaded one of my last test tubes with a bit of the mixture. I didn't want to use all of it at once, because something could always go wrong, and after the test tube was loaded, I brought it outside and started to heat it with my blowtorch. At first, nothing seemed to happen, but after a bit of heating, the reaction started to occur, and to my surprise, it was incredibly tame. I expected at least some resemblance to the first one, but it was a pleasant surprise just how calmly everything went. After letting the test tube cool down, I firstly wanted to crack it open to get the product out, but then I remembered about my test tube shortage, and instead of cracking the tube, I decided to see if I can just scrap the product out. When I tilted the tube, almost everything came out as a nice powder, and with a little bit of tapping, I managed to even get the big piece out. I mean, I was just so happy because you don't see such a nice reaction too often in chemistry. The powder was really black, meaning that it was probably pretty pure magnesium silicide, and to test it, I got myself a crystallizing dish and filled it with some dilute hydrochloric acid. Immediately after adding the powder, it started crackling and making fire like crazy, and that confirmed that the magnesium silicide was very pure and generated lots of silane. That also meant that my silicon hasn't failed me and that the road involving it is much better than the silicon dioxide one. I give it a solid 10 out of 10. Anyway, now that I have a reliable source of silane, I want to do some experiments with it. As a first one, I wanted to make some explosive silane bubbles using some liquid soap, but that unfortunately didn't work out. Another experiment was to make some silane in a test tube to see how it would act, and to do that, I just added some of the powder into my last test tube, rinsed it with some water, and then added some dilute hydrochloric acid. Immediately, a lot of silane gas started to form and ignite, creating a weird brown layer on the sides of the test tube. For the next experiment, I processed the rest of the starting powder to obtain more of the magnesium silicide. After that was done, I transferred it all into this random evaporating dish that I found, got it outside, and placed it on a stand. I also made this 5-minute craft super advanced safety device, consisting of a piece of bamboo, some tape and a beaker, which I later filled with dilute hydrochloric acid. I mean, you can see where this is going. I then got outside, and holding the stick, I poured the acid onto the magnesium silicide from a safe distance. It resulted in the creation of a ton of silane gas, which created a huge fireball that was just beautiful. What's even more beautiful is that the smoke coming off this fire is actually just silicon dioxide, which in a poetic way symbolizes the circle of life, because I've taken the silicon out of the ground and chemically processed it only to return it in the form of some superfine, ultra-pure silicon dioxide particles. Anyway, for the last experiment in this video, I want to please all of the pyromaniacs out there, because I still have some of the thermite mix from earlier, and what better way to utilize it than to destroy the corpse of this poor can even more. Anyway guys, thank you very much for watching, like and subscribe if you liked the video, and before I end it, I just wanted to let you know that I have a Patreon, and if you want to support my channel and gain access to some spicier videos, you can become a patron. I already have 4 patrons, to whom I am very thankful, and special thanks go to the $5+ ones, who are R2D2 and Riley Reprogul. So again, thanks for the support, and see you guys in the next video.